Good morning, students. My name is Ajibola Moruf Surakat from the Department of Philosophy. So today I'll be taking you on lecture 4 on GST212, Philosophy, Logic, and Human Existence. Before now, the other lecturer must have introduced you into what philosophy is all about. That is meaning, nature, and purpose of philosophy. And also in his lecture 3, he must have taught you the relevance of philosophy to human existence. But today, we are going to look at argument and evaluation. Argument and evaluation. That's what we're going to look at. And the structure, the course is going to be structured as follows. Introduction, meaning of arguments, terms connected with arguments, elements of an argument, types of arguments. Under it, we have simple argument, we have complex argument, and we have inductive and deductive arguments. Then we are going to look at types of inductive argument and classification, also types of deductive argument and classification. We also look at differences between inductive and deductive argument. Though it is possible that this topic may not end today, so it will extend to week 5 or lecture 5. So by the grace of God, I'll still be taking you the lecture 5 by the grace of God. So now, introduction. Now I want to make it clear to you that argument thrives on logic, because logic is fundamentally connected, or let me say fundamentally concerned with the criteria for evaluating good argument from bad arguments in such a way that good arguments can be distinguished from bad ones. So in this wise, that's why we said logic is concerned with argument. So when we are talking about logic, it is primarily with arguments. And when we are talking about argument, we are not talking about when two people are shouting on top of one another, or when there is a quarrel between one or two people. We are talking about a structured argument. An argument that has structure, that moves from premises to conclusion. So that is what we are going to do today. So now, what is argument? Argument can be defined in various ways. Now, argument can be defined as an intellectual reasoning, and not a showing match, disagreement, or dispute, or angry, or exchange of words, like I initially said. So argument is not such. Argument can be defined as a set of propositions in which one or more propositions, known as the premises, are seen to provide reasons for the truth of another proposition, known as the conclusion. So in this wise, we have two sides of it. We have the premises and we also have the conclusion. So meaning that when we define an argument as a set of propositions in which one or more propositions, which is the premises, or which are the premises, are said to provide reasons or evidence for the truth of another proposition, known as the conclusion. So we have what we call the structure of an argument moves from conclusion, from what we call it evidence to conclusion. So there are reasons. Your reasons are the grant. They are the evidences you are going to use to support your conclusion. So those are the reasons. So now, we can equally define argument as a set of reasoning consisting of premises and conclusion. So note that. So now let me give you another definition of arguments. Argument is a claim or train of reasoning consisting of statements argument is a chain or train of reasoning consisting of statements. When we are talking about statement, we are talking about statement that expresses a fact. This fact can either be denied or affirmed. So, in the course of the discussion of this topic, it is possible that we substitute statement for propositions. So, statement and proposition are interchangeable in logic. So, statements are statements of facts that are declarative, but being declarative, it can be affirmed and it can also be denied. So that's how we define it with an argument as a chain or train of reasoning consisting of statements. So one of the statements is the claim, which is the conclusion. That is, when you have a number of premises, a number of evidences, a number of reasons, from there you can infer your conclusion out of it. So meaning that you have reasons, or you have what we call grounds, or what we call evidences to support your conclusion. So that is why we define it as the claim, which is, one of the statements is the claim, which is the conclusion. So meaning the conclusion is the destination of your argument. So when you say conclusion, meaning that you have, after looking at so many things, then you have not decided. You have now formed a conclusion out of it. So the other statements are the premises, which the arguer proposes to use to support his or her claim. That is the reasons. When you have a number of reasons, those reasons are what you intend to use in order to support your claim. So invariably, what I'm saying is this: you move from reasons to conclusion. You move from reasons to conclusion. So argument therefore has two parts: the grounds, which is equally the reasons, or the premises. So meaning we can look at, when you say the ground, Ground, the ground is also known as the reasons, evidences, or premises. So the premises will be used to support a claim, and the conclusion, which is also known as the claim. So when you are talking about conclusion, you are talking about your destination, the claim of that argument. Now, I also want to let you know that arguments provide the most acceptable way of systematically arriving at truth, or of establishing our claims, or of resolving disagreement in any discipline or area of life. So whenever there's an argument, it means that if two people are involved in an argument, one is claiming to be right, while the other one is claiming to be right at the same time. But however, in the course of claiming to be right, you have to provide justification for your facts. And the other person too needs to provide justification for his or her own facts. And while you are doing that, there must be a number of reasons that you need to adduce in order to support your conclusion. That is the claim. So and while you are doing that, the other person must be convinced beyond reasonable doubt that what you are claiming to be right is actually true. And it is the purpose of logic to win people over to your side by marshalling your points one after the other in order to convince that person to accept your own position. So argumentation therefore involves the process of making and challenging claims, backing the claims up with reasons, criticizing those reasons, and trying to provide exceptions to them. That is the process of argumentation. So you have to provide reasons to justify, and you have to back your reasons up with evidences. So if there is any argument that does not go in line with that, then it means that such an argument lacks what we call standard. So, and that's why in logic, we make use of arguments. And that's the structure of the arguments that we are talking about. Now, secondly, we are going to look at terms connected with arguments. We have terms that are connected with arguments. Number one, we have what we call inference. You want to infer from a number of premises. You want to infer a conclusion. You want to come to a conclusion. So this can be defined as the mental act and the logical process of reaching a conclusion from the list of stated premises. Mental act and the logical process of reaching a conclusion from the list of stated premises. So don't forget, we have said premises are your reasons, they are your evidences. They are your evidences to support your conclusion. So in that wise, when you have a number of reasons, a number of evidences, then from those number of reasons or evidences, when you must have looked at them and discover that they are okay, then you can now infer a conclusion out of it. So that's what we refer to as inference. And again, we have what we call logical reasoning. Logical reasoning. Logical reasoning is the mental activity of marshalling and coordinating one's premises. Marshalling and coordinating one's premises, reflecting upon the weight and making inference, an argument out of the process. You marshal. After marshalling, that is why you marshal, then you coordinate. When you have a number of premises, you can say, okay, this premise is not relevant to this conclusion. You remove it. So you look at those ones that are relevant, then you support those ones that are relevant with your, those ones will give rise to your conclusion. Because once you have done away with those that are not necessary out of your evidences, then you move them there to your conclusion. And that's why we define logical reasoning as a mental activities of marshalling. That is marshalling points. You raise your points or your reasons. Then you coordinate those things. You look at them one by one and see those ones that are fitted and those ones that doesn't fit in. Then you remove them. Then you reflect upon the weight of each of these evidences. Then from there, after removing those that are not needed, then from there you arrive at what we call conclusion. So that is, you make it out of what we call inference. You infer your conclusion out of it. Then note that while all reasoning is thinking, it is not all thinking that are reasoning. So when you are thinking, you might be thinking without having any focus. So you can be thinking without having any focus. And you can be reasoning without having any focus. But the moment you have a focus, you have a purpose, you have a target, then that is when you can talk of logical reasoning that is directed towards a goal. Then the third one is proof. Proof in an argument. A proof is an argument that succeeds in establishing the truth of the conclusion. The evidence that succeeded in establishing the truth of an argument. That is what we call proof. But in a weaker sense, or in a mathematical sense, a proof is a demonstration that certain conclusion will strictly follow from certain premises, even though we may have no reason to accept the premises and the conclusion as true. But as long as whatever the conclusion you arrive at, as long as they are from the premises, then it is called proof. You have been able to establish a proof in order to arrive at that conclusion. Now, that will take us to the fourth side of argument, which is elements of argument. Elements of argument. So, argument has 6 elements that we are going to consider briefly here. Argument has 6 elements that we are going to consider. Now, the 6 are: 1, ground. The ground, as I've told you earlier, is the reasons, your evidences for supporting a claim. So when you are talking about ground, you are talking about reasons, We are talking about evidences. Now, from there, we have claim. Claim is your destination of the argument. That's the destination of the argument. Then, or we can equally call it conclusion of the argument. So claim can either be destination of an argument or conclusion of an argument. While grant is the evidences or the reasons in support of an argument. So there are premises. So the grant is equally known as the premises, which will give rise to a conclusion. So the premises is known as evidences that you have, reasons that you have in order to justify a conclusion. Now, the elements, like I've said, we have grant, we have claim. Then we have backing. That is something to back up your claim. Then we have warrants. And again, we have quantifier. And lastly, we have rebuttal. So now, in essence, we have grant, we have claim, we have backing, we have quantifier, and we equally have rebuttal. Now, grant, we can get our grants through many sources. Through observation, we can get our reasoning, our evidences. Through experiments, we can get it. Through some factual data, we can get it. Through common knowledge, etc. So it is possible for us to get our evidences or our reasons for an argument. So when we now want to define premises, we can define premise or premises as specific facts brought up to support the claim. Specific facts brought up to support the claim. That's premises. Now, talking about conclusion, which is also known as the claim or destination of an argument. So this one, you can say, okay, therefore, is conclusion locator. I conclude that is conclusion locator. I submit that is conclusion locator. Hence, is conclusion locator. So it follows that all these things are known as conclusion locators. So we equally have what we call general premises locators. And when we are talking about conclusion locators, this helps us to distinguish premises from conclusion. So the moment you hear therefore, I conclude that, in addition to, I maintain that, it follows, it implies that, then it shows that you are only trying to tell them you are already on the conclusion. Again, we have what we call general premise locators. This helps us to distinguish premise from conclusion, as we have the one that helps us to distinguish conclusion from premise or premises. Such words, such as because, this follows from, after all, for the following reasons, on the ground that, etc. Also, we have what we call specific premise locators. So this one helps us to decide premise from premise. So that means when you have specific premise locator, when you have a premise, you have another sub-premise supporting the major premise. So you have a premise, and you have what we call sub-premise supporting what? The major premise. So that's when we use specific premise locator. Specific premise locator. Again, we have already talked on the grant and the claim. Don't forget, grant is equally known as reasons, evidence in support of a claim, or justification or reasons, or grant. So those names are the same. So don't misinterpret them or mismatch them. Premise is equally what we call grants, and it's equally what we call reasons. So those three, they are the same. While claim goes with the destination of an argument or conclusion of an argument. So you should note that. Now, warrant. What is warrant? in argument. Warrant is a general statement with which the claim and the grant are connected. General statement with which the claim, that is the conclusion, and the grant, that is the premises, are connected. So it tells us whether the reasons offered lends support to the claim. Whether the reason you are giving actually gives support to the claim. That's the purpose of warrant. So when you are moving from premises to conclusion, there is a warrant. The nature of the warrant is to let you understand whether the conclusion has any grant or anything at all as a support from the premises. So warrant provides the link or connection between the grant and the claim. A warrant in logic is a linking generalization. A good argument must try to provide a credible warrant for its claim. For example, now let me give you these premises and the conclusion. Then let us look at the warrants there. Now, premises. Bingo drove his car late at night without the light on. Bingo drove his car late at night without the light on. Premise 1. Premise 2, he was drunk. Premise 3, he fatally knocked down and killed a person. That's premise 3. So we have 3 premises now, 3 reasons that will now establish a conclusion. 3 reasons that will now establish a conclusion. So now, the conclusion now is, therefore, Bingo deserves to be punished based on the premises, based on the justification, based on the evidences. 1, we said he drove his car late at night without the lights on. Premise 1, he was drunk. Premise 2, he fatally knocked down and killed a person. Premise 3, then conclusion. Therefore, which is a conclusion locator, Bingo deserves to be punished. Now, the question is, why should Bingo be punished? Why should Bingo be punished? That's not the question. So this why questions is now the task of warrant. The why question is now the task of warrant. It's now the task of warrant. Now, anyone who kills another person while driving blind and drunk is liable to be punished. That's legal term or legal warrant. Now, we are using that in the legal term to support the position that anyone who drives another person, who drives and kills while driving, is liable to be punished. It's liable to be punished. Now, in the case of Bingo now, he was drunk and he drove blindly in the nighttime without the lights on. Now, in the process of that, he knocked down somebody and killed the person. Now, we now say he deserves to be punished. Now, the one will now say, why should he be punished? Now, there is a legal portion that says that anyone who kills another person while driving blind and drunk is liable to be punished. That's the warrant. So the warrant is not giving you reasons to support the position of the conclusion. So that is the link, generalization, trying to link the conclusion and the premises together. So that is the warrant. So we have a warrant in any ethical field, in physics, in any field. We have what we call warrant. Now, there is also what we call backing. To every warrant, there must be a backing. To every warrant, we have said the question why is the purpose of, is the task of warrant. The question why, that's the task of warrant. Now, we are coming to backing now. To every warrant, there must be a backing, which make it more reliable. So that backing will make it more reliable. So it gives strength to the conclusion. It gives strength to the conclusion. So a backing is seen as a shield for warrant. is seen as a shield supporting the warrant in order to give rise to the conclusion. So, a good backing must be seen to be relevant to the warrant. A good backing must be seen to be relevant to what? To the warrant. In addition to being known to be currently in use and non-controversial. Currently in use and non-controversial. For instance, in law, a backing is usually a law, a decree, a bylaw, edict, or anything that is trying to fortify the warrant. So, in other discipline, the sort of experiment or theories will be accepted as backing for a warrant. That's in other fields. Results of experiments or theories can be accepted as backings for warrants. So from our previous example, let's bring a backing for it. Now, claim bingo deserves to be punished. Then the warrant now is that anyone who kills another person while driving blind and drunk is liable to be punished. Now, the backing will now be section so, subsection so, of the criminal code or country or legal code or any code says that. So that section that you are quoting is now serving as a backing for what? For the warrant. It's now serving as a backing for the warrant. Now we have number 5, we have the qualifiers. Qualifiers. A qualifier indicates the degree of confidence that we have towards the claim. Degree of confidence that we have towards the claim. It is usually a phrase or a word. That's the quantifier. Usually a phrase or a word that says whether this conclusion follows conclusively. It says whether the conclusion follows conclusively or not from the premises. Now, it's to establish a favorable condition for the conclusion. To establish a favorable condition for the conclusion. Now, when you use words such as certainly, definitely, necessarily, all these are telling you, giving you assurance that because of this, the quantifier that you have used, that word or phrase that you have used, is to establish confidence. To establish confidence for your conclusion. Between your premises and your conclusion, this quantifier is now telling you, after the backing, as position is that certainly this person deserves. When there is a portion of this law or criminal code or legal code that has said that person deserves to be punished, then definitely, the word definitely, certainly, necessarily indicates that the person cannot escape the punishment. Then the final one is what we call the rebuters. The rebuters. In every law, there's an exception. In every law, there is an exception. So, when we cannot use definitely for a quantifier or in an argument, the moment you cannot use definitely, certainly, necessarily as a quantifier, then there is a recognition of the possibility of an exception to our warrant. So when we know that a warrant is a general statement, rebutter are exceptions to the general statement. Now, for instance, the traffic light on the road, the moment it brings out red, indicates that you need to stop until it shows the green. Now that's law. So if you jump that traffic light and you are caught, you'll be punished. But however, there is an exception to it. The exception to it is that if police officers are pursuing criminals, as at that stage, they can jump or disobey the traffic and nothing will happen. So that's an exception. Or when there is an emergency and there is traffic and the traffic is stopping every motorist. So definitely when there is an emergency or accident or anything, that this should be taken to hospital. Now, as at the time the ambulance get to that stage, there is what we call an exemption to it. So we have exemption in so many of our things. So that is that on the elements of arguments. Now, let's quickly look at the forms or types of arguments. So let's say forms of argument. We have simple argument and we equally have complex argument. We have simple argument, we have complex argument. Now, types of argument. We have inductive argument and we also have deductive argument. We have inductive arguments, we also have deductive arguments. So now, simple argument. What do we mean by simple argument? So this is under forms of argument. Don't forget, I've said forms of argument. We have simple argument and we have complex arguments. So now, simple argument. In simple argument, the claim is supported by one or more premises on grounds. One or more premises or grounds. That is the claim. Your claim is your conclusion, don't forget. Your destiny of the argument, don't forget. So, and when this your conclusion is supported by one or more reasons or premises, then that is a simple argument. The argument is simple. The first example we give the other time, Bingo drove blind and drunk without lights on. He knocks down a person, or he was drunk, then he knocked down a person and killed the person. This argument, then therefore, this is a simple argument because the word therefore is an indicator of the conclusion. And from the three premises, we are now inferring a conclusion from it. So that is simple argument. It is simple. So that's why we said the claim is supported by one or more premises or grounds. But the premises are not further supported by reasons. The premises are not further supported by what? By reasons. So normally, such argument consists of two or three premises with another statement as a conclusion. Two or three premises with another statement or proposition as a conclusion. So it is very simple. That's why we call it simple argument. Because you can easily identify the conclusion. So the word therefore is an indicator that, okay, you're already at the conclusion from the premises. So remember, when we talk of simple premises, it is stated in a simple way that you can easily identify the conclusion of the argument. Now, complex arguments. Complex arguments. Complex arguments. So complex arguments take the form of debates, essay writing, a write-up, article writing, etc. So whenever there is a debate in complex arguments, a debate needs reasons, so many reasons to justify your conclusion. In a debate or when you're writing an article. Now, why we call it complex is that the conclusion may be at the middle of the argument. It may be the first statement of the argument, and it may equally be the last in the argument. And aside from that, the premises of such arguments will also have sub-premises. Another means premises supporting the major premises. That's why it is complex. So when you have, take for instance, you want to say, okay, Olabisi Onabanjo University is the best state university in Nigeria. Now, you must have reasons and counter reasons in order to support your position. So you must have reason, you must have sub-reasons or many other reasons in order to support. And when you get to conclusion, there must be a major conclusion and possibly auxiliary conclusion supporting the major conclusion. And remember, what I've said is that in complex argument, the conclusion may either be in the middle, it may be at the first statement, it may be the first statement, or it may equally be the last statement. Now, you are to identify this through what we call conclusion locators or premise locators. So when you see premise locators, in addition to, you are trying to support a particular thing. So meaning you are trying to support. First, second, you are trying to give reasons. All these are still premises. So when you have a major premise in a complex argument, you also have what we call minor premise. So complex argument has very many major claims as premises. It has very many major claims as premises. It also has many premises supporting each or some of the major premises. Now you can understand that now. It has very many major reasons or major claims or premises, either claims or premises. And also it has many premises supporting each or some of the major premises. And lastly, it has major conclusion and also auxiliary conclusion supporting the major conclusion. So in any, the difference between simple argument and complex argument is that a simple argument is stated in a simple form so that it is easier for you to determine the premises from the conclusion. But in complex argument, it takes the form of debate, letter writing, debate, and other things like that, article writing. So in those ones, you are going to provide reasons and counter in order to arrive to establish a very solid conclusion for your position. So that is the reason. So we now concluded that it has very many major claims, major premises. It has many premises or many premises, meaning, it has many premises supporting each or some of the major premises, and it also has major conclusion and what we call auxiliary conclusion supporting the claim. Now, to the two types of arguments. We have inductive argument and we have deductive argument. Now, what is inductive argument? Inductive argument is a process of reasoning empirically, to infer the known from the unknown, to infer the observed from the unobserved, and the inexperienced from the experienced. Now, listen to that. A process of reasoning empirically, that is something you can verify. Observation that you can be verified, that is verifiable. Things you have seen that happened. That is what we call empirical. So it's a process of reasoning empirically to infer known, that is what you have seen, from what you have not, you are yet to see, from what you have observed and what you have not observed, and the inexperience, what you have experienced, from what you have not experienced. That's what we call inductive argument. Inductive argument. Don't worry. Now, to reason inductively is to argue that the future will be like the past. That is, you are coming to a generalization. Having observed so many things, you are now trying to generalize that, okay, because so and so things have happened continuously like that for a number of periods, then it means that is how it will continue to happen. That is inductive type of reasoning. So the truth of the conclusion of the inductive argument is a new information. It's giving us a new information. So it is beyond what is contained in the premises. That is for inductive argument. Now, let me elaborate better on that. Now, for inductive arguments, when you say inductive reasoning, majorly it is good for scientists. Having observed so many things happening at a particular time, or after going to laboratory to carry out experiments, and repeatedly the experiment is giving them the same results. Excuse me. It is going to be concluded that the experiment will continue to provide and to produce the same result anytime, any day. It is known as inductive type of reasoning. Now, for instance, let us say that since 2010, you have observed that every 1st of January, it has been raining. And your observation has, from that time, has taken you to, you observe from that time, from 2010, has taken you to 2024 or 2025, our current present year. And you see this every 1st of January, it has been raining. You can now come to the conclusion, based on the observation, what you have experienced, you can now come to the conclusion that every 1st of January, there must be rain, based on what you have experienced or observed. That is what we call inductive argument. It is based on empirical verification. But however, it is possible that there will come a January 1st of another year and there will not be rain. So when such happens, then it has nullified the argument. And that is why we said inductive argument deals with probability. It can hold for a number of years, but once it is faulted, then it becomes no argument any longer. So that is the type of inductive arguments we are talking about. So it is beyond what is observed. For another example, let's take another example. That you have a neighbor close to your house, Mrs. James, and Mrs. Jane got pregnant for 4 times and she gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. Now, you discover that Mrs. Jane is pregnant again. And you conclude that now, because of the empirical fact that you have, that the pregnancy is equally going to result into a boy. So it is inductive. It is 50% probability. But in inductive argument, we can term it as either weak or strong, good or bad. Either weak or strong, good or bad. The reason behind that is that the number of evidences in support, if the number of evidence in support is high, then the probability is high. But if the number of evidences in support is low, then the probability is very weak. It's like now, in a class of about 100, and you discover that you have interviewed about 6 students or 7 students, and you discover that the 6 or 7 students are very brilliant. And because of that, you now generalize that all the students in that class are very brilliant. It's an inductive type of argument. It's an inductive type of argument. So the argument in support can be very weak, it can be very strong, it can be bad, it can be poor, and it can be high or it can be low. So now, to further expatiate on inductive argument, we can now say that an argument is said to be inductive if its premises only support but do not guarantee its conclusion. If the premises only support but do not guarantee its conclusion. From the example given so far, now you discover that every 1st of January since 2010, it has been raining. Now, you have observed that till 2025, and you now generalize, you conclude that every 1st of January, it must rain. So it predicts what the future will be. But when it comes a 1st of January and there is no rain, it has rendered the argument useless. But however, you have a number of evidences in support of your position. And that's why we can say it is very high. You have a very reasonable probability, very high. So, meaning that the conclusion may give you something different from what you have claimed. It is true that you have observed it, but your conclusion at times may differ. So, for instance now, Mrs. James gave birth, the 5th child, and he gave birth to a female. So, in that wise, your observation is what? So that's why we said it is with probability. So it is with probability. So also note that inductive arguments do not claim that their premises, even true, support their conclusion with certainty. It doesn't claim that, because anything can happen. But remember, it is with 99.9% probability. It can be true for a number of years, but the day that it is proved wrong, then that is the end of it. We have so many theories that have been propounded by people that are no longer functional now. But as long as it functions, or it is functional, well, it is regarded as theory. But when a new one comes to take over from it, it is no longer, it has been proved wrong. That is what we call inductive. So it doesn't predict with certainty. It does not predict with certainty. On the other hand, in the inductive mode of reasoning, the conclusion logically implies an item of information not necessarily implied by the premises. Item of information not necessarily implied by the premise. So the premises of what you have observed. Now remember, there is no limit to the number of premises in inductive argument. And that is what determines whether it is high or low, whether it is weak or strong. You can have as many as 100 premises. It is based on observation, remember? And because it is based on observation, that's what determines whether it is high or low. So, whether it is high or low. So whether it is high or low. Now, in the inductive mode of reasoning, the conclusion logically implies an item of information not necessarily implied by the premises. So what we are saying is this, that is, the premises has given you assurance that, okay, this is how this thing will be. And from that, it is possible that there is a particular time that it does not work, it doesn't work that way again. So once it does not work that way again, it has rendered it invalid. So that is inductive argument. Inductive argument is structured in a way that from one set of factual proposition, that is premises, it moves to a conclusion. Note that again. Inductive argument is structured in such a way that it moves from one set of factual proposition to conclusion. From the example I've given to you, Mr. James' first child is a boy, second child is a boy, third child is a boy, fourth child is a boy. Now, Mrs. Jane is pregnant again. And you have concluded, or you conclude within your mind, that because he already, empirically of what you have seen, because she already has 4 boys, that the next one will equally be a boy. So once you now say, okay, the first one, second one, third one, fourth one are boys, now conclude that therefore Mrs. James Fitch's child will be a boy. It's a probability. It is a probability. So from that example, you can also know what we are talking about. So on this note today, let me stop here, and next week I will conclude this part and inductive arguments by the grace of God. So what we have discussed today so far is argument and evaluation, and I've taken you through the introduction by saying that logic is fundamentally concerned with the criteria for evaluating good reasoning from bad ones. That is, distinguishing or separating good reasoning from bad reasoning, such that good arguments are distinguished from bad ones. So in this wise, I've said equally that logic is concerned with arguments, and I've defined argument in various ways. What's an argument? I've defined argument as an intellectual reasoning and not a shouting match, disagreement, or dispute. An argument must be supported by facts. An argument has structure, which is premise and conclusion. I equally define argument as a set of propositions in which one or more propositions, that is, form the premises. They are said to provide reasons for another proposition known as the conclusion. So they form the truth for another proposition known as the conclusion. So from what I've taken you through, we have premises, we have conclusion of arguments. Then I equally talk about terms connected with argument. I talk about inference, which is defined as the mental act and the logical process of reaching a conclusion from the list of stated premises. We also have logical reasoning, which is also a mental activities of marshalling and coordinating one's premises, reflecting upon the weights, and then making an inference, an argument out of the process. We also define proof as an argument that succeeds in establishing the truth of the conclusion. So from there, we talk about elements of an argument. There we talk about the grant, which are the reasons or premises. We also talk about the claim. We also talk about backing. We also talk about warrant. We also talk about quantifier. And we also talk about rebuttal. In argument, we talk about what we call premise locators and conclusion locators. Premise locators are pointers or indicators to premises, and they have words such as because, this follows from, after all, for the following reasons, and all like that. And we have conclusion locators such as I submit that, I conclude that, hence, so it follows that, it entails that, accordingly, on and on like that. So they are conclusion locators. So also we talk about forms of arguments, which are two in number. We have the simple argument, and we have the complex argument, and we have types of arguments. We have inductive argument and deductive argument. So simple argument, so it's stated in a simple form that you can easily decide the conclusion. You can easily know the conclusion. So this one is not further supported by further premises. So the argument is stated in a single way that you can easily understand the conclusion of such arguments. And we have complex arguments, which take the form of debate, essay, letter writing, argument, article writing, and so on and so forth. And I said that in this one, it has very many premises, and it has many premises also supporting each or some of the major premises. So it has major premises, and this major premises is further supported by many premises. And we also have major conclusion, and we also have auxiliary conclusion. So we also move on to types of inductive arguments, which is, type of arguments, which is inductive argument and deductive argument. So we have been able to take inductive argument to some extent today. So by next week, which is week 6, by His grace, we'll be able to, week 5 rather, not 6, week 5, we shall be able to look into the remaining part of inductive argument and take over deductive argument, and the differences between inductive and deductive argument will be explained. Thank you. God bless you.